I want to point out that I didn't have orange thread, serger thread, to match the sweater completely. So what I did was I picked a neutral serger thread, 3 cones, to put in the upper and lower looper and in the right needle. And then in the left needle, the one that's going to bite through and show on the edge of my seam, I picked a matching orange all-purpose thread. So that's a way that you can match colors without going crazy and buying, every color in the rainbow on your big cones of serger thread. So, pick a neutral. I like gray for a lot of things. Gray, I think, is the best neutral to have in your collection of threads. So use those for the loopers and the right needle, and then use a color that matches in your left needle. All right, so let's start by looking at where I eased back into the underarm seam on the sleeve. And you can see that, I just gradually blended in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a large eye needle or a bodkin, something that I can just tease the stitching apart. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten the stitch and I'm going to tie the tails. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the looper threads so they tighten down on the edge of the sweater. Now I know that the orange one is my needle, right? Because I matched that. So if I just tighten these other 3, see how I've eased in the stitching, so now it looks like it's easing into the edge instead of hanging off loose like it was when I finished. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 2 and 2, and I'm just going to tie a square knot to finish this off. And then after I tie the knot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave the tail into the chain a little bit, and then I'm going to trim it so that the tail is inside and it's not just hanging. Okay, so see how that looks? Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just trim these a little bit, and I'm going to feed them into the big eye of my needle. And then I'm just going to weave them into this stitching a little bit. I don't need to go far, just a little bit like this. So it looks like that. So there's a knot there, but I just didn't want to clip the tails. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip the tails a little bit up like that. All right, so that's how you finish the side that's on the sleeve where you've blended back into the original seam. And wherever you have to stop, maybe it's a little bit higher up, wherever you blend back into your original seam, that's how you can finish that neatly. Now at the bottom where I started stitching, okay, so see it looks like this on the right side, and it looks like this on the wrong side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take the tails and I'm going to feed them in on the wrong side of the chain. So wherever your back of your garment is, I'm going to feed them on that side. All right, so this is the back side of my sweater. So this is where I'm going to feed them in. And basically, I'm just going to go like this and feed them right in like this. All right. Then I'm going to trim that. You can see because I used gray and it's on gray, you can barely see that. So that's kind of cool. But to finish it, I'm just going to do a very, very small amount of hand stitching. And it's going to be really no big deal. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that this bottom edge of the seam is very secure. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my small hand needle and I'm going to use some of the orange thread that I used in my needle on the serger. All right, so I'm just going to thread a very small amount of this orange thread in my needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a very small amount of hand stitching to secure the bottom of the seam. I think it's more comfortable if the seam is encouraged to lay flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it to the back side of the sweater. So this is going towards the back. I'm going to just take a stitch into that underside like this. Okay, so I've got like a little knot right there. And then before I secure the bottom, I'm just gonna take some loose stitches through the serge chain and the tail to secure the tail from slipping out. This is instead of using a fray check. I'm really hesitant to use fray check on, you know, a high-end. This is a sweater from Saks Fifth Avenue, so I don't want to end up leaving like a dark mark on the sweater because the fray check, you know, left a, you know, like change color. So instead of doing that, see how I'm just weaving back and forth and I'm catching the tail. That way the tail is secure and I don't have to use fray check on something like this. And really, it just takes a second. I'm literally just taking some bigger stitches through the back side of the seam, like that. And it's really not even noticeable, even though I'm using orange. All right, so now that I've secured that, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to fold the seam allowance to the back, like this. Okay, and later if I give it a little steam, I can encourage it to lay that way. But to keep it from coming apart at the very base, I'm catching the seam allowance and sort of whip stitching it shut. Okay, so that way the seam will stay shut and you won't see that serged edge. It'll be like, you know, like it's laying flat. See how that looks from the right side? That way nothing will poke out. Okay, and you can't see it from the right or wrong side. See how that looks? All right, so that's how you would finish the hem edge of the seam that you took in. If you have any questions about how to take in a loose sweater or knit top that's hanging off your shoulder, you can comment below or you can visit my blog at J Stern Designs. I hope you guys have a great weekend and I'll see you next week for JSD TV on Tuesday.